Oh, I got to hit go live. I thought I hit that. Oh, I did. Okay. There we go. Now we're back. Okay. We're having some technical
I
issues.
love technology. It's my favorite thing in the world.
I think it was Facebook that kicked me off because all the Facebook pages that we streamed to I think that was the issue. Well, whatever. We didn't even criticize Mark Zuckerberg when we got kicked off. So I want to ask you about your sit down with Claude and with Claude Giroux, because you have one, obviously he's the big name and he's the longest tenured athlete in Philly. He's been here for 14 years since he debuted and been a full-time player. First, let me ask you not about your interview, but just about your interaction before and after the interview. What kind of did you get from him?
Well,
because you've been around him a lot. So
yeah.
Like you know, like the vibe when.
Well, and I'm a big G defender in terms of when people talk about his demeanor in press, like in interviews and stuff like that, because when we sit down and talk before the light goes red, I mean, like great stuff. But he's been asked the same 24 questions repeatedly for almost a decade and a half. And so I think he gets very polished at this career. Like he knows how to get through them and pivot out of things he doesn't want to say and whatever. And that certainly was the case in the interview as well. Although he kind of agreed to be more open about certain things. And also, like I said, I'm not going to ask some of these questions that I know you're just not going to answer because it's a waste of both of our time. Beforehand, I'll say it was interesting because we were all ready to go and Bill Barber came walking by the interview room and was talking to Claude, and Bill was very animated in his side of the conversation. And I could hear some of it. I don't really think it's my place to share. But it was really interesting because you could tell it was kind of like a words of wisdom chat kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So that set the tone. We didn't get to chat too much beforehand, which normally we do, because everything was set up, and then it's just kind of him and Bill talking. And I was just, this is not my place to say anything at this point in time.
Yeah.
And then after, he was just very sincere after we got done. And Claude's always been really good to me in interviews before and after. And I always talked about his wife and his sons and, all of that. So I think in that way, he's always been pretty genuine and sincere and very friendly. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to read into it as it was like a sincere, emotional, thank you, it's been nice to work with you kind of a thing. But it was kind of weird because we're all sitting there as the interview gets done and we're like, is this the last time we're going to interview him? As a flyer? That could be so strange. But there was one question that I knew if I asked him to reflect on his legacy, he wouldn't do it. I know he's smarter than that. Yeah. So I kind of worded a question about, when you look back at yourself and, you became captain, 2013? Was that when he became captain? I'm trying to think now.
Yeah, shortened season.
You became captain back in, 2013, and it's almost a decade ago now. If you could go back and tell yourself then advice from what you know now, what would you do? And his answer was really interesting and reflective, just about enjoy it, the time flies, enjoy the ride, enjoy the highs, learn from the lows, all of that. And that reflectiveness was interesting because, listen, I was trying to play a little bit of chess with the wording of the question. The whole point was to try to get him to be reflective, but I didn't know if he would play ball, if he would really do that. And he did. And I was like, it is interesting to hear you reflect now, because you wonder, is this as close to crossing the line talking about his career as a flyer in retrospect as we're going to get? And it was the closest we got, but I also don't want to read between the lines and put words in his mouth because I have more respect for him than that. But it was weird to listen to because he doesn't talk like that, but that wasn't the question I asked. I didn't ask him reflect on your legacy. It was more something else that I felt like he would answer.
Yeah. Because he doesn't want to put.
It's strange.
Yeah, he doesn't want anybody that is in that room to get the sense that he's checked out and thinking about somewhere else. It's like leader till the end.
He has not given up. Let me tell you something. He has not. And Jonesy, I was talking to Jonesy about it. He said it on air. He was like, it is interesting as a player. You do get excited about the opportunity to maybe go win a Stanley Cup. You look at, if it's Colorado, you put Claude on Colorado,
Oof.
And you sit there and you go, that team, he feasibly could be a few months away from a Stanley Cup. That's got to be exciting. That being said, it seems like that's item 15 on the list right now.
Yeah.
Because that's how he is. And so when people criticize his leadership, I'm like, just go away. We used to sit next to the tunnel. We would hear the investment in the games and the team and himself. He cares a lot more than I think people give him credit for.
Yeah, you're right. And it's one of those things where, I think people from the outside see the sea and it's romanticized of what it means. But really the big thing is there's 6 to 8 guys that are leaders. That's how it has to be in that sport. You have to, leading is multiple men, multiple players.
Yeah.
Because not one man can do it. It's too much of an undertaking. There's leaders. There's another group of players that, maybe need to be led, and then there's another group of players that don't necessarily need to be led, but aren't vocal leaders.
Well, and think about it. It's like it's unlike. I'm trying to think. It's unlike any. Like I grew up playing soccer. I was a soccer player. If you are the captain of your team, you are usually on the field for the full 90 minutes, and you are responsible for, going at the refs if they make a bad call. Like you are supposed to be the emotional leader the entirety of the game. In hockey, you're an emotional leader for however long you're supposed to lead in the dressing room full time. But realistically, you need someone to lead each shift. It's unlike other sports. Like being a captain of a basketball team or even being a captain in football, like you can have a defensive captain, an offensive captain, a special teams captain, whatever, but they are fully with their group all the time. Yeah. Hockey's so unique in that you'll be with your line maybe for the entirety of the game. I mean, we see that change all the time as well, but you're not even with the same D pairs most of the time. So you need a ton of leaders. And a good leader doesn't have to I really hate when people think a good leader has to be like the strongest at the top, loudest, most in your face, most emotional, or the friendliest, or the funniest, or whatever. Sometimes a good leader knows when to step back or when to delegate who needs to say what in certain situations. Like if it's the one voice all the time, it doesn't hit the same way.
No.
And I just think if you talk to young players about what Claude's like as a captain, like they beam. They absolutely beam at the way he exemplifies what other players need to do. And again, I always joke about it. If he falls down at practice, he looks like he's mad at the ice. Nobody cares more than him. And that's what a captain should be in my book. But
people look at Pronger when Pronger was here, and he was obviously an alpha. He was a commanding guy. But I will tell you that some of the younger players, when he was here, I mean, they called him, to me, off the record, Captain Asshole. I won't say who said it, but he was Captain Douchebag, Captain Asshole. But because Prong could be, they also know that Prong's got in front of a camera and could play the game in a way, right?
Yeah.
So some players didn't appreciate that. And athletes are different now, they need to be led differently. It is 1,000%. Different. Yeah. I mean, what Mike Yost said the other day, I thought was really interesting about, being a teammate. And sometimes you got to go up to your teammate or your best friend and tell them that you need more.
Yeah.
I think that's
James
important
Harden, Tyrese Maxey the other day. Like at halftime, he said, "Are you going to play tonight?" And he scored 21 of his 26 points in the second half of the game. Yeah. And that does work in certain relationships with certain players. I fully agree with you. But athletes, like I'm only 29. The way I was raised versus the way kids who are 21 were raised was drastically different. Like the things that our coaches used to be able to do, like punishment runs and stuff like that. Like I now hear all the time about like, oh yeah, you can't do that anymore. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like when I would get grounded, I had to paint walls in the house. Like, and some people, well, you should have called CPS. No, I shouldn't have. It taught me valuable lessons in life, but people aren't raised. They don't speak to each other, like whatever. And I do think that, to your point, like Pronger is an alpha in a very extroverted way as well. And I think Claude has a certain amount of assertiveness it's still very strong in its way. It's a strong assertiveness, but it's not an extroverted, loud assertiveness. It is just,
No.
this is the way things need to be done. Do them or don't.
Yeah.
And
Follow me by example, not by
yeah,
words.
yeah,
I mean, and you've been to enough practices. I've been to enough practices, and the way he prepares and his like I always said that, there's always some guys that no matter what they do, losing just kills them. And he's one of those guys. Like I say that if he was playing ping pong inside the players' lounge and he was down in the game, he would carve your eyeballs out to win.
yeah.
And not because he's getting paid to play ping pong, but just because he has to win.
I've been on the team plane where they're playing cards, and like we used to sit all the way in the back and they sit all the way in the front, but you can still see a little bit. You could tell when G was losing. Like it was very apparent. Like he cares a lot. And I do think he cares a lot about his, like, in a quiet way that makes you, like, for example, my dad, super reserved guy, but when he speaks, it's serious. It's like, don't cross that line ever again. And I think G, with his teammates and stuff like that, even in the media, at least to the media, I don't know that always comes out in the media, there are certain moments where I've gone like, oh, he's really like, this is a slight posture where he's essentially being like, don't do that again. Yeah. And I've seen it. I've seen him do it to writers. I've never, thankfully, had it happen to me with him. But where
Jedi
it's like,
mind trick.
Don't do that. Like, don't do that.
Yeah,
and
don't go there.
It's not him pulling a Voracek and calling somebody else at a press conference. He handles it in a different way. That doesn't mean it's a less impactful way, just because it's not as obvious or as blatant as maybe what people are used to seeing. But to me, it's almost like a sign of maturity. So yeah. I don't hate on it at all. I say there all the time, like, if you guys could hear and see the things that we've heard and seen in the tunnel when they're leaving for a period where the period did not go well, you'd never question how much he cares or how much of a leader he is or how vocal he is to his group.
Yeah. I thought it was funny earlier this year when ESPN Plus had the game and Farabee went down the hall and just obliterated a stick, right? Uh-huh. And people were like, oh my God, like what's going on? Like I tweeted it out, I think, that we worked in that hall, right? That's where NBA One is. That door right there where that camera is where I've been positioned for 15 years. And the amount of players that I've seen come down that hall and obliterate a stick, I mean, I almost think goalies, forwards, D. I mean, Scott Hartnell would literally walk into the room, smash it at the shower stall, and then, all right, see you guys, and walk out. He was good after that. You got to get it out.
I believe you 100%. Yeah, no, I mean, I was only down there for what, like 3 years, 2 years?
Yeah. And you saw a lot.
I've seen so many sticks, so many expletives, so many this, so many that, whatever. And it is interesting to me, like, people's perception. And that's why on post game, I will always preface when we talk about body language, unless it's like horrible, like unless it is very blatantly bad. I always say, I hate to read into this, or I hate to read too much into this, because I hate when I go online and people are reading into something. They're like, look, he looks like he doesn't even care. And I'm like, I sat there and watched this man break a stick over his knee and scream the longest uninterrupted chain of curse words I've ever heard. Trust me, they care. Like, you don't know.
I used to love it because when Couturier would break a stick, he would break it high. And when my son was really little, Couturier is a left-hander. He'd break it high enough that I'd grab the stick in the hallway and I'd take it to the tray and say, cut it right here, and then put a knob on it. And then Evan would have a new stick, and then it's pro stock.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So cool.
He would always break them high.
That's the perks.
I'm like, Cooch, if you're going to break it, just break it up at the top. He's only 4'9" right now, so I don't need a lot.
Going for a haircut. Just take a little bit off the ends. I need some length.
I haven't had that in a while, but
sorry. Didn't mean to do that. I Brad Marched it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I resemble that remark. Let me ask you real quick about, the notion of what they're going to do, whether it's a lot of people want scorched earth. They want to tear it down to the studs and they want to rebuild it. That's not going to happen. And there's no guarantee that works, because we've seen, look at Colorado. Mm-hmm. Okay. They're great right now. They haven't won anything, but they started that scorched earth in about 08,
Mhm.
right? Look at a team like Toronto. Yeah, they got some really good players. They haven't won a round of the playoffs. They haven't won a round of the
Toronto
playoffs in
fans
18
are
years.
miserable all
Yeah.
the time. They're
Yep.
so excited, and the thing is too is like Philly will get this. They're the kind of miserable that has like all the potential energy, and the kinetic energy instead of leading to a championship just explodes in your face and everyone's miserable. Like Sorry.
Well,
go ahead.
they pull they're a fan base that hasn't learned, because you cannot let the first 22 games of a season get you that much in a frenzy. It's a long year. Like Jack Campbell was off to a great start. He's going to win the Vezina. They should sign him for eternity. And now he's struggling because it's a long season.
And then the soup got cold.
Yeah. And exactly. Soupy got cold. And now they're like, oh, he sucks. And the team's, whatever. But the notion of them moving forward, and one of the terms that Chuck Fletcher used, and Danny Briere reiterated it, was they need, quote, high-end talent. And I agree, especially if you're going to deal Giroux. How do you accomplish that's another story. But that's a big piece of this puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's interesting too, because Chuck and Danny both talked about high-end talent, and that usually it takes the draft. Like there's not always a ton of it available on the free market, although I know there's all the Tarasenko talk and everything else when the Blues came to town and all that. But here's my concern, right? Every time I talk to somebody about, okay, you want to tear it down, who are your absolute must keeps? Every single time it's at the bare minimum 5 players, which I would argue is a full teardown. At the max, and most frequently, it's like 9 players. And I'm like, so you don't want a full teardown. You want the aggressive retool, which is what they said they're going to try to do. And that's fine. The high top line finishers, like Cam Atkinson plus, like you need, because Cam's really been the only guy who's like been a finisher this season, I'd argue, outside of Claude Giroux, and even he's had some streaks, but can't really blame him when you look at everything going on around him. I agree, but when you talk about the thing that scares me about the draft, and this is true of every sport, and I was listening to an interview with Deion Sanders, he was talking about it with football, is he was saying, I'm not saying this to disrespect scouts. I get what their job is and how they have to do it, but you really have no ability to predict what a guy is going to do, even generational talent. Like, look at Nolan Patrick. The year before Nolan Patrick was drafted, he was discussed as a generational talent. Then the year he was drafted, stock went down a little bit. He goes number 2 instead of number 1. And then it's, I feel terribly for what Nolan suffered in his career. But it's where that target has landed is a far way off from generational talent, right? People are talking about Bedard, not for this upcoming draft, but the draft after that. And yeah, he could be a generational talent. That would be huge, but he could also not. And that's where high-end talent through the draft scares me. I get it's probably the path of least resistance, but it's also the path that's like dicier at the same
These are
time.
Kids. Yeah, they get drafted. They don't even have hair under their armpits yet.
No.
They don't shave.
Exactly. I mean? Well, Farabee still can't grow a mustache. But no, it's like I mean, high-end talent anywhere. It's just so hard to come by.
Yeah. I hate that everybody wants to throw the term around of generational talent. Like, they throw this generational talent term around like it's a box of Juji fruits.
Well, and I'm like, how do you know? They're playing against other 16-year-olds. Like, how do you know?
Generational.
He was 5'9" when he was like 17 years old. Now he's 6'3" and a fighter. Like,
yeah. But like to me, in my lifetime, hockey generational talents, here they are. And this is just, I wasn't old enough to really appreciate Bobby Orr, but Gretzky, obviously. Lemieux, obviously. And then the next one I'll go to is Crosby and Ovechkin.
Right.
And then I will give it to Connor McDavid. I don't even give generational to Austin Matthews. Superstar, not generational. Generational, the term, I could give you a little definition, is once in a generation. You can't have a generational talent every other year. It doesn't work that way.
No.
That defeats the purpose of generational talent.
Yeah. But that's what, like.
But we want to label everything nowadays.
Well, let me get your take on this too, because I don't get to hang out with you downstairs as much as I used to. what would be your approach here? Are you team scorched earth? Are you team aggressive retool? Are you team get these pieces back? Because I'm very much like, we didn't ever see this year's team. You can't just run it back. I don't think that works at all. But we never saw this year's team. Like, even watching Kevin Hayes right now, I think he's moved the best he's moved all season. Transparent. I've watched him at practice. He is the most agile I've seen him look, I think, since like early parts of last year. But that makes sense with when you hear about how much was going on with the abdominal injury. But we did not see any iteration of what this team was supposed to be ever. And I know people talk about some of the games that Ryan Ellis played. I don't think Kevin Hayes played in all of those games.
Didn't play in any of them.
Yeah. So what's your approach? Because people who want to burn this team to the ground haven't even viewed part of the house yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, people want to burn it to the ground because the Sixers did the process, and the NBA and the NHL are far different. But by the way, the process and 4 years of losing intentionally for the Sixers hasn't yielded them further than a second round. They've gotten knocked out in the second round 3 times.
And basketball is an entirely different sport.
Totally different, right?
When people talk to me, I'm like, stop.
Yeah,
basketball is an entirely different sport. It is a sport that is now run by its superstars. Their superstars have total agency over teams, which is unlike any other sport. The
and
NFL
they can opt out of a contract. In the NHL, you can't opt out of a deal.
1,000%. And when you talk about basketball, realistically in basketball, the way the NBA plays now, you need like 2 superstars and a good supporting cast, or 3 superstars and a decent supporting cast.
Yeah.
In hockey, you get 2 superstars, you have 1 line.
Yep. And it doesn't matter. Look at Edmonton. Edmonton drafted number 1 overall 4 times in 7 years.
Edmonton
and
would be a great NBA team.
Yeah, in the top 5, 7 of 8 years. And they just fired their coach and they're on the outside looking in. They have the most talented hockey player I think that's ever put skates on his feet. He's not the greatest, because that's accomplishment. That's different. But he's the most talented player I've ever seen, McDavid. And they have Draisaitl, and they haven't won shit. Right? And so it's the ultimate team sport. But as far as, like, to answer your question, no, scorched earth does not work. Look at Buffalo. Doesn't work. Look at Edmonton. Hasn't worked. Toronto hasn't worked. Do they have some good players? Absolutely. But have they won anything? No. I look at a team like the Kings, who are recoiling. Won 2 cups in 2012 and 2014. And then a couple down years and they recoiled. And I think they're going to be a good team. Like, you get Byfield. They still have some of those veterans like Kopitar and Doughty, even Quick playing well. So I look at those teams and go, that's the way to do it. And plus, look, I know people don't want to hear it. Every team suffers injury. Like Pittsburgh lost Malkin and Crosby and overcame it. The injuries are part of the equation. And I think that the big thing they got to figure out, and I actually texted with Mike Yo about this, and I said, the big thing is you have guys that you have to figure out. Everybody says they want to win, right? And they're part of the solution, but words don't mean anything to me. It's all about actions, right? And how you show up as a pro every day, and how it's what you do, not what you say. So they have to figure out who the guys are that are part of the solution with every fiber of their competitive being, and then make sure they fit. Because I think the team has some passengers, and I think that the pieces don't fit. Having talent is great, but pieces have to fit, and you have to check a bunch of boxes. And I think that that's what they got to do. I think there's going to be some hockey trades. I think there's going to be some moves, obviously, here at the deadline. It's a tough task for Chuck Fletcher to recoil it quickly. I do like that the organization has made an investment in a couple of areas, with player development, because that's obviously an issue, with scouting, which has obviously been an issue, and then in analytics as well. And we started out here, I'm not a big analytics guy, but I don't discount it completely. But they've grown their analytics department to 5 full-time, well-paid employees that get health benefits. They're not going to just hire that department and not use it as a tool. Right. And I just had Ian Anderson on Flyers Daily. And first of all, I can't even believe that they let me talk to him, A, and then B, talk to him and tape it. and let people hear it, but they did. And so I think that they're positioned from an off-ice perspective to have an effective retool. But as far as scorched earth, not my. You're asking the wrong guy. I think it's foolish to do it.
Everybody, somebody said to me, "You're too close to the picture to see the painting," and I'm like, "Listen, the people that are close to the picture are kind of all saying the same thing, though. So at some point, maybe we do see like what actually makes the paint. But I don't pretend to know all, and only time will tell. But I'm interested. I want to ask you because I just want to pick your brain. Trade deadline coming up here. Who are your must moves? Who are your I would actually not move them pieces? And I'm not just talking expiring contracts. And because I was told everybody's on the table, barring like Couturier and Carter Hart and like Kevin Hayes was the guys with no moves. Yeah. But who would be your must moves? Who would be your can't moves? Who would be your surprise move you'd make?
Yeah, I mean, like that notion of a player is untouchable. Like I've gotten a number of messages and tweets from people saying, "Zach,
Carter is untouchable, though. There's no way they're."
Yeah, I'm not moving him. But outside of that, any player, I'm not hanging up the phone.
Right.
I'll listen. There's guys that I want to move, and then there's guys that I'm not looking to move. But hey, if you're going to blow me away, you blow me away. Yeah. And like Provorov's in that camp, right? Mm-hmm. For me. Sanheim's in that camp, although his recent play has really been impressive. And
I was going to say, I don't know if I'd move Sanheim now.
I really don't want to move him all of a sudden because he's a confident player and he stretches the ice and he provides offense and he's got a little bit of bite defensively. But I think part of that's because of Ristolainen, who again, I'm not looking to move. I'm not looking to take.
So you're not in camp move Risto.
I'm not in camp move Risto. I'm not in camp don't move Risto. It all depends on that element of can you extend him? Because I can't lose him for nothing.
Uh-oh. I got to freeze.
There we go. We back?
Yep. Sorry.
Yeah.
You can't not move him. It all depends is what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, if you can't extend him, you got to move him because I can't lose him for nothing. So, but like, I mean, obviously Giroux is a player and you know how I feel about Giroux. I've been very vocal about it. I think he's a totally underrated player in the city. But him, Justin Braun, Martin Jones, those guys all need to be moved. Farabee's not a guy I want to move, but I have to look at the trifecta of Konechny, Sanheim, and Provorov and figure out what I'm doing here. And, because we're kind of up and down and we got to figure it out with those three players. And I think they're a really big linchpin that will be more decided in the offseason than now.
I would be so hesitant. This is selfishly speaking as a GM to move Provorov because I think everyone's on the same page that like his struggles are not work ethic or athletic ability. It's a lot of the between the ears stuff.
Yeah.
And I would be so hesitant as a GM to say, all right, let me move him to a different situation unless I'm getting like everything but the feedback. Yeah. And he goes to that other situation and it's the mental reset that he needs. And he's got a steady defensive partner because that seems to be the key for him mentally for whatever reason. He goes there and becomes everything that he's capable of and more because it really is situational and psychological for him right now. And it's crappy because like I can sit here and watch a game and go, like, I do understand why mentally this is so taxing for him. And he wants to play 60 minutes a night. It's not like he's like, this is too much for me ever. He will never, ever do that. I don't think, unless there's something I don't know that switch that flip for him, but he would rather do more. And he's probably already being asked to do too much. And so I'd be so terrified as a GM to be like, go to this other situation where everything comes together perfectly. And you're like,
we're kicking ourselves.
Yeah.
He's got the reliability of availability too, which is really important for a guy that plays as many minutes as he does to be that available. I think is a big element of it too.
Yeah,
totally agree. And I mean, he could be one of those guys that makes you kick yourself more than Patrick Sharp or Justin Williams did times 10 because he's a defenseman.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about passengers, like he might not be playing well right now or playing up to what he could be. But he's not a guy who, like, he might unwillingly be a passenger on the in the car driving in the wrong direction, but not because he's not fighting to get out of the car. I think the issue is that he's fighting so hard to drive the car in a different direction, and GPS is just like rerouting.
Bill Meltzer calls it with him. You got to stop trying to score the 3 or 4 run goal.
Yeah.
There's no such thing. It's always one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Like you want to hit like the 3-run home run, and you incur too much risk when you do that, and it goes the other way.
Well, he wants to make the game-saving play and score the game-winning goal on the power play, and he wants to make the right defensive decisions all the time. And then he wants to overcompensate sometimes for defensive partners that aren't where they should be or could be or whatever, which is not a knock on Justin Braun, who's been his D partner for much of the season, because Justin Braun's outplayed, I think, everybody's expectations by a million times over and has been a kind of defensive revelation at the beginning of the season for the Flyers. But it's just it's hard to watch, because you can see, to me, it seems like you can see how much certain things wear on Provorov in a way where he tries to fight through them and work through them because that's how he's wired. And sometimes I think you got to let the current just take you over for a little bit and not fight it. But it's just because he wants to win. Like I can't knock him for caring. It's just, you can tell it's wearing on him.
Yeah, no doubt. And losing will do that. Taryn, this was awesome. I thank you so much for doing it. I know everybody's going to really enjoy hearing it if they didn't see it live or hear it live. And I'll see you at the rink, man. This was great. Thanks for doing it.
Jason. I love catching up with you. It's not the same as when we used to just shoot the breeze down in NBA 1. I don't get to see anymore. But thanks for having me on. I love talking hockey with you.
And hear Taryn on Flyers Talk with Jordan Hall and with Joe Fordyce.
Mm-hmm.
And and you guys do that how often?
Usually twice a week. Depends on how many games they have. If they it'll be Wednesday, Friday this week, I believe. It's all about their schedule and everything changing. But we try to do twice a week. You can find it wherever you get podcasts, or tune into Flyers pre and post game live. If you're hanging around for games, we're trying to make it fun and funny and entertaining. Me, Al Morganti, and Scott Hartnell. I'm usually trying to herd the cats in the right direction, but don't always do it.
In your next appearance on this show, we're gonna have to talk about you working with Al.
Oh, that's gonna be
an episode on its own
podcast. For the guy, I try to tweet them as soon as I hear them because there's so many I forget. But randomly in the middle of the game, sorry, I know you're just trying to end the podcast, but randomly in the middle of a game the other day, he goes, it's legal to walk around with a crossbow in the state of New Jersey. And I was like, what made you think of that? And he was like, I have one. They're cool. You just walk around with them. And I was like, why would you? And he was like, I don't know. It's a conversation piece. And I was like, what goes through your brain? What goes through your brain?
In 2010, I'm getting ready. I was at WIP at the time. And I'm getting ready to go to Montreal for the conference final for the first game. And I got my passport on my desk in my office and everything. So whatever, I pack up, I leave, I go to the airport, I get on the plane, I land in Montreal, I'm going through customs, and I hand my passport to the lady at the customs counter. And she looks up at me. She's like, "You're kidding me, right?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She takes my passport, flips it around, and there's a picture of Bin Laden where my face is.
No.
Thanks, Al.
No.
Thanks, Al.
I'm going to ask him about that tomorrow at work. Oh, my goodness. That sounds like an Al Morganti thing to do.
Did that once, and Lou Holtz put a picture of Lou Holtz on my face another time.
Oh my gosh. Natalie Eganoff has some good Al Morganti stories too. Me and her swap war stories from time to time. But Al's he's like a
kid.
Like an 11-year-old boy.
Yeah.
But in a grown man's body.
Yeah.
He only likes to eat butter noodles and unseasoned chicken salad. He really is like an 11-year-old boy in a grown man's body. Man. Kills me. Well, Jason, this was so fun. We'll do an Al Morganti tribute podcast someday coming up. I would love to do that.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing this, Taryn.
Bye, Jason. Thank you.
There she is from NBC Sports Philadelphia and the Flyers Talk podcast, Taryn Hatcher. She gave us a lot of time. I really appreciate it. So thank you, Taryn. Hope you guys enjoyed that as well. Everybody, get the Park Sportsbook app because it's fantastic. It's great to use. It makes watching games that you really don't have an emotional connection to even more fun because you got a financial connection because you can bet on all different things, including player performances, props, parlays, teasers, puck lines, money lines, spreads, you name it. It's all there for you. live in-game play-by-play betting is awesome. You're going to love it. So download the app, put it on your Android or your Apple iPhone, open up an account, deposit your first bet. Will be risk-free up to $500. You won't need a promo. Your first bet, just open up the account. Again, deposit, risk-free bet up to $500. So make sure you grab the app and get in on all the action, whether it's college hoops this month, whether it's pro hoops, whether it's you look at, obviously, the NHL, betting hockey, first to score, exact score, points, whatever it might be. Maybe baseball at some point as well. Just get the app and check it out, peruse it. It's real easy to use, and you're going to have a great experience with it. Again, on all the different player performances, props, teasers, puck lines, money lines, and everything there for you. It's very simple, and it will not overwhelm you, and you'll have a lot of fun with it as well with live in-game play-by-play betting. And also, make sure you follow Parks on all the different social channels at Parks Sportsbook on Twitter. Follow them on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, and you'll get daily specials, great content, including this podcast and Aji's coming up tomorrow with myself and Harry Mays, a Tuesday edition. Harry's back from Florida, so we'll talk about his journey as well. So everybody, thanks for watching this episode of Park Sportsbook presents Stick to Hockey Live. Another brand new one coming up on Thursday. In the meantime, enjoy the hockey, and we'll talk to you coming up tomorrow for Aji's, and then Thursday for episode number 28 of Park Sportsbook presents Stick to Hockey Live. Have a great Monday, everybody.